I've been building stuff since like middle school when I taught myself to code. I really taught myself to code because I was running RuneScape private servers. So all from video games. Ran a pretty popular Minecraft server throughout high school. Uh, Basically just like all motivated by building stuff for my friends and just building and just learning how to build products. Uh, Graduated 2018. Worked in big tech for a few years. Uh, in 2020, so I've been around throughout that whole time. I've been like following crypto and like buying some crypto, but never really like thought of myself as wanting to build in crypto. But when 2020 came around and DeFi really kind of sprung up, that's what really got me interested. Particularly because like I spent a few years working at a bank, and so just got really deep into like the um, specifically like lending that was happening on chain. Um,
Right.
so I spent like a few months like building a lending protocol, teaching myself like Solidity and like just how to build crypto products. And that started around DeFi summer. It took me to like middle of 2021, so like June 2021, and I was at Amazon at the time and decided that I just wanted to work in crypto full time. So uh, left Amazon and just started searching for a place to land in crypto. I kind of applied to a ton of places. And during that time, I was also like getting way deeper into NFTs because that's like when they started to spring up. So I joined OpenSea in 2021, right before kind of like the bull market picked up, and basically wrote out the entire cycle with OpenSea, all the way to when NFTs basically like collapsed. Um, at OpenSea, I led the protocol team, so I'm basically in charge of all the teams that do everything that is crypto at OpenSea. So built our teams that built our smart contracts, our blockchain indexers, all of our metadata systems. So basically, just as we scaled at OpenSea, we hired a lot of non-crypto people. So I tell people my job was basically translate all the crypto stuff to in a Web 2-ish API for people to build products on top of internally. Um, and so yeah, that was fun. Learned a ton because it was like the bull market and was working like 16 hours a day, probably more, and on weekends. Uh, and then left in May 2023 to join Manifold, which is a NFT creator tools. Ran engineering there for a few months and just decided I wanted to do something myself. And so have been kind of just exploring ideas over the last year.
When you joined OpenSea, was it like obvious at that point that the NFT mania was going to be like what it was, in terms of like how crazy it would get, and that, or like, and or that OpenSea would be at the forefront of a lot of it, or was it like OpenSea was just one of a number of players in an NFT space that was like starting to be interesting, but not at all like sort of obvious that it would be what it would be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was as obvious at the time. I was definitely an OpenSea user, but I've also like was using other apps. So I, as a user, I was just using like what served the best purpose. But like as a builder, I wasn't really thinking about like OpenSea above the rest. So like at that time, there was a big like internal battle between for me because like first of all, like I while working in NFT Standardize, my real goal like I just wanted to work at Uniswap, and because but like I like just could not get a connect there or like could not get an interview, and
Mm,
so I ended up like just trying to find something that I can use as like a stepping stone to like get into more deeper into DeFi. Um,
right.
but when I like had offers in hand, it was basically between OpenSea and Foundation. And like I remember at the time, like in hindsight, yeah, everyone's like, "Oh wow, you're so like you joined OpenSea. That was great because that was like they basically won that bull market." But like at the time, like it wasn't that clear, and I was like very much like it took me a few days to decide whether I wanted to join OpenSea or join Foundation.
Do you remember if there was a particular thing that helped you make that decision with some conviction, or was it just really a close call till the finish and you just kind of picked one?
Yeah, I mean the thing that actually closed it for me was uh, one of the OpenSea founders, Alex Atala, who jumped on a call with me, and like I just had really good like a really good connection with him, and like we like vibed really well, and like it seemed like he was really like like he was really like fighting to like say have me join them, and so that kind of like ultimately like, that kind of pushed the needle. It was more that like it seemed like he really wanted me to join, and that made
Yeah.
me feel like that would be a good opportunity.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. How many people was it like roughly when you joined versus when you moved on?
It was like 20 when I joined. It
Wow.
peaked at
Okay.
like
So really small.
300, and then when I left, it was like 150.
Okay. Um, yeah, that sounds just like a rocket ship experience to learn like probably a decade's worth of experience or to gain like a decade's worth of experience in whatever it was, a year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the most valuable experience for me, which I think is gonna continue to be useful, is like I'm an engineer, but like at OpenSea, I actually didn't write that much code because I kind of was the bridge between like engineering and different functions, and so like I kind of just like I like to like just like fill in what's needed and like just do basically do kind of like the grunt work. And so like
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with like finance and legal and marketing and like just like helping them understand like this fucking crazy technology that's happening and like how can they talk to like non-crypto people about it, and then also like any new feature like say like for example when we built our protocol called Seaport, like we have to like make sure like it's like okay to do legally, and like how can we like defend it like, and it's just like a lot of things like in web 2 you don't have to think about as much when you build products, but in like crypto it's like you can get a lot of scrutiny in a lot of different aspects, and so I think like that was really useful for me to pick up.
Winding back a little bit before that, I guess, before you landed the job with OpenSea and when you just took the leap from Amazon, like you took the leap before you knew what you were going to do next, before you had the job lined up, right? Like how hard or easy was that to make the decision after like, going through more of like probably standard education, graduate, going to big tech? Like how hard was it to kind of take this leap into the unknown and eventually with an idea that you wanted to get into crypto?
So I didn't like leave and then look for something. I was looking for something, and then when I saw that things were kind of taking shape, I left. So like
Okay.
it wasn't like I had the job in hand and then I left, or it was, but it also wasn't like I left and then had the job. And it was like in the middle as I saw things going well, I decided to just like leave early, and then I took a week or so off and then joined. Um, but like personally, like as someone who was around since DeFi summer, like I I had like enough like that I made off of DeFi summer that I could just like even if I didn't find something immediately, I could, or like didn't like after I left, didn't like excite me, I could probably still like live off of a few more months. And like as like the bull market was picking up, there was a lot of like just open source opportunities to like contribute to things that you would get paid for as well. So like I wasn't necessarily worried about like not having an income. It was more about like finding what is like the right place for me to use as a stepping stone for like future endeavors.
Right. And then last thing on like sort of your story, I'm just curious, like in the earliest days when you were mostly building, excuse me, mostly building around like sort of your hobbies and interests with like games and RuneScape and Minecraft and things, like was there anything else of note outside of like RuneScape and Minecraft that you were building like in middle school
Yeah.
or high school?
Yeah. So actually, like, I spent probably like 10 years in just like building in and around like games and the game industry. So, like, throughout college, I actually like uh built a ton of stuff around Rocket League. And I actually I hate telling this because it makes me seem like such a nerd, but like I built like a whole esports analytics platform for Rocket League and ended up actually selling that to another company while I was in college. And
Wow.
that was that was I think I would think when I did that is like when I was like at some point I do want to like just build build my own products rather than like um, work for someone.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, did you, when you then graduated and went and like worked for in, these big tech companies, Amazon, even not that it was a big company, but going and working at OpenSea rather than like being the guy, was it at all an adjustment from like that college experience of doing your own thing, or it just kind of felt like a natural transition given that you're graduating and like moving on to like career type
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, I think it was pretty natural. I think one thing like if you talk to people that work with me is like I'm not someone that's just gonna like force myself to fit in. Like I usually am very vocal about like how things that I think, and a lot of times like I just have no filter, and I just it's not because I want to be mean. It's because I just want to do what's best for the product that we're building. And so if you talk to people that I work with at OpenSea, they'll say that I just very blunt at times about like the direction we're going and the uh, things that we're building or the people that we're hiring. And it's not it. I think like that aspect of me makes it so like even if I was at a big even when I was at a big tech company, it wasn't like I don't know, I didn't feel like I was boxed in. And ultimately like it is like a confidence thing, I guess, because like I am always of the belief that like if I say something and someone like it's not I'm not trying to offend them, but if they get offended and I lose my job, then I will just go get another job.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think I operate the same way, and it's just to me, it's just like logical to be blunt. Obviously, you can sometimes like sort of you know, round the edges or whatever the right terminology would be to like say something in a way that might be taken a little less, you know, whatever, like upset someone or whatever. But like in general, if you're like sugarcoating everything that you're saying or holding things back on what's your actual, perspective, it's just like to the detriment of the product, like you said, it's to the detriment of the team. And like in the short term, you might save a few people having their feelings hurt on like some work that they did that maybe was in a direction that doesn't make any sense to proceed in, and they'll be upset in the near term to have to like pivot. But in the long term, you're saving them like, weeks or months or more of proceeding in this wrong direction. That's just like one specific example, but I think that's a pretty common one. It's like kind of get the sense that we're like headed in the wrong direction here, but gonna kind of keep my mouth shut and stay open minded because I don't want these people to feel like they've been wasting their time. And then like 6 months later, you end up having the same conversation that you should have had 6 months prior because you didn't want to like step on any toes or whatever. And that's just, like I
Yeah,
said, it's just
exactly.
like one example, but it's really, I think, a disservice to people to be dishonest, especially in a direction where you're just like saying nice things, but they're not like true. So anyway, I definitely sympathize with that just approach to work in general. And to your point, you sort of have the backstop of like, well, if I really, step out of line here and get fired, like I'll be fine, which is also, I think a lot of people like sort of have this imaginary worst case scenario that isn't actually very likely. It's like they might just get to the point of like, wait, if I say this, like I might get fired. And then they don't really think beyond that. They're just like, and like, I might get fired and like I can't get fired. But like really, if you just think like one step further, it's like you get fired, like you'll be fine, like in most cases.
Yeah, and I think like the getting fired part is a bit of a like people that like it's a bit of a thing that probably won't happen. Like I
Yeah,
think people like over index on that. I like what I found is actually like being like brutally honest. And like again, you're not trying to be mean, you're just trying to be honest about the product that you're building or the people that you're working with and how good of a job they're doing. You'll find that like leadership or like other like peers or at like your level if you're at a bigger company, they're gonna just appreciate you and that way more if you're just honest.
yeah. I think it's generally respected, and it's for those reasons that we just discussed, like between the positive impact of operating that way and the general respect that it seems to garner. I actually have a hard time understanding why more people like don't operate that way. But it is like most people sugarcoat their perspectives in the workplace, like in a work environment, I find at least. And maybe sugarcoat their perspectives isn't exactly the right way to frame it, but like just generally don't say what they think, um, like out loud. And of course, there might be, maybe that's like a symptom of, some organizations and less so or not at all others. But, it's just something that I think exists out there. That's kind of I don't know. It's interesting a little
Yeah.
bit. But sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, no, I was just kidding.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about what you're working on today. I think the catalyst for me to reach out was everything going on with anoncast and anon maybe more broadly. But you've been on my radar, like I said, sort of seen you on the feed a bunch and on Farcaster and have heard from multiple people that you're like one of the best builders out there in crypto period on Farcaster, etc. So been sort of like on my radar for a while, and then Anoncast was like, all right, and I started this Purple People podcast. So I was like, all right, perfect. That's why I love. I've had another podcast for like 4 years at this point. And Purple People is just very recent, but the other podcast sort of made me realize like having a podcast is so great, if for no other reason that you just have like this default ask, like whenever you just like want to talk to someone, it's just like you don't have to like come up with like some specific excuse or like whatever. It's just like, do you want to come on the podcast? Then you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. And so anyway, I was sort of lucky to have this default ask. So I figured obviously we'll talk about Anon, but I know you're working on some other things. But maybe let's start with Anon. How did that like specifically Anoncast, how did that come about for you? How much of that how much is that occupying your time, like this week, last week, for the foreseeable future? Do you think it's going to be like your main thing, or you have other things going on? Maybe you could
Yeah,
just paint like sort of the broad strokes, and then we can dig into each.
yeah, it's kind of weird. I didn't like own. I mean, should we talk about the lore, or should we just start with anon,
Yeah,
anon as anon?
we can talk lore by all
Yeah, I mean,
means.
I know you're probably familiar with the Super Anon cast lore, where someone anonymously launched a token on Super Anon, and then Woj basically disowned the token, and then the people that bought the token wanted to basically do a community takeover of it. Um, all throughout that, I was like, I actually didn't even own Anon. I kind of was just following along, and I saw a bunch of energy around like the community that had like basically bought Anon when it launched and wanted to figure out something to do with it. And so I was working on something else completely different for like 6 to 8 weeks. And last weekend, like I guess it was Sunday, I just like saw all this energy. I was feeling a little bit burnt out, just like working on the thing that I've been working on for weeks on end, like 12 to 16 hours a day. And so I just was like, let me take a break and just build something for them, because people were like asking for it. And so like the original idea was to do a 33 bits fork where people that have an on can post anonymously. Uh, and yeah, it also was an excuse for me to like learn ZK. And so like, yeah, I spent like 6 to 8 hours, I think, on it. And that's when we launched that. Like, that's all it took to launch the initial version. So basically like a weekend project, right? Um, Launched it, and then yeah, it kind of just immediately got a lot of attention. And so like it wasn't like a whole like big plan of like, oh, this is gonna be the next big thing. I need to launch this and like set up a ton of features that we're gonna. No, it was just like I'm hacking on something for a few hours and gonna launch it. And I bought some tokens alongside it to basically be one of the people in the community. Um, and then yeah, it just took off.
And I mean, since launching it, you've added at least some features. Like I don't actually know, to your point, like you didn't, you weren't really involved with Anon through like, the first few milestones, and then, got into it with Anoncast. It's funny, like on Farcaster, you can sort of be passively aware of something like going on, but like if you don't like kind of double click, there's like too many like layers to it that you won't really know what's going on until you actually decide to like click into it a little bit. So you can sort of be like aware of something by name, but not actually know or care what's happening. And then like you actually have to go in. So like similarly with me, like I sort of knew what was like I saw about Anon a couple times, just kind of didn't click into it, whatever. Eventually, like sort of dug in, and I think by the time I saw Anoncast, I had acquired enough anon to be able to cast from it, so that's cool. That was like the first thing I did, and I love how like it has this, like it takes a little time to generate the proof, I guess, and so it has this like little spinner, like a loading thing
Yeah.
when you cast it. It's like generating ZK proof or generating proof or something, and I thought that was just like the coolest. I cast this some point. I thought that was like the best like loading thing. Like I'd actually rather that than it process the cast immediately. Like while no one wants like loading time, generally speaking, the fact that it like is like basically behind the scenes like anonymizing you and like it says like generating proof, like it's just like a very cool loader. And for what it's worth, it doesn't take it takes like, I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds or something, I feel like. So it's like pretty quick and
But
just like a
yeah,
nice
that's
button that
like
I haven't seen that button anywhere else.
yeah, that's good that you think it's 3 to 5 seconds because it's actually like 20 to 30 seconds. But if it feels
Really?
like it's 3 to 5, that's great.
That's wild. I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna argue with it. I would have guessed like at most 10, but three feels a
Or
little
maybe you
fast.
just
But like,
have a maybe you just have a beast machine.
yeah, that could be. So anyway, it's super pleasant and easy experience and simple site and everything like that. And when I first, encountered it, it was, um, you could cast with a minimum balance. And that threshold I think has like changed a few times, like up or down. And then you can also like promote the cast to go on Twitter where Anon has an account, Anoncast has an account that has like the verified organization badge now, which is pretty legit. And then you can also like delete if you have a certain threshold. You need like a certain threshold to delete and to promote to tweet. And I haven't really dealt with either of those, but were those both things that were also available right away, or did you add those after the initial launch of just the cast threshold?
Yeah, so it's only been a week, but like I'm already like forgetting what features launched when. But we someone could double check this, but like I'm pretty sure we had Twitter like right at the start because our and when I say our, I mean like other like, anon holders, which I guess we could talk about after. But like I I think we had Twitter initially because the thought was that we need to
Expand.
yeah, like Farcaster is just like such a small network compared to Twitter. And like we thought that we could post like the best, like the incentive to post will be the incentive for it to get on Twitter and get distributed, right? And so we found that the system works pretty well. And so like with the like promotion, uh, it's called promote right now, but I think it's more of like a curation layer. And so like top anon holders, uh, are able to curate content for Twitter and they're incentivized to do that because they hold a lot of anon and they want to make sure the best content is on Twitter so that they continue like uh, driving value to anon as a token.
I see. So it's less of an individual who has enough to cast, but also enough to promote. It's less of that person like casting and promoting their own cast to Twitter, and more so a separate like curation layer, which is, goes hand in hand with the delete function as well. So basically, there's this level where you can post, and there's another level where you can curate, and the curate includes both, pruning the warpcast casts and being able to delete those, but also deciding what sort of graduates to a tweet.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like this is hard to follow because we've changed it a number of times. But like you can on so the way that it works right now, and I'll just like give it straight up so that it's like all summarized is on Farcaster, we by default post everything to Farcaster. It's just a great way to like just have an open stream of data that anyone can read from. And there, nothing gets deleted. Nobody can delete anything that gets posted on Anoncast on Farcaster. We then have Anon bangers on Farcaster and the Anoncast Twitter, where people with 2 million Anon can basically curate content and promote it to those two channels. Um, and that way we have this fully like uncensored base layer that is Anoncast on Warpcast or on Farcaster, and then we have this curated layer where only like the best content is going to get posted there because I think most people don't want to see literally everything. They just want to see good content. And so we kind of are trying to, at least for now, have like over the last week we've like tuned a bunch of numbers, changed a bunch of parameters, and like we've landed on this system that I think works pretty well, that like is uncensorable for the people that complain that things are being censored, and is not spammy for the people that were complaining it was too scammy. They just have to follow the right accounts.
What's the hardest remaining issue you think, like in terms of finding that balance where, I mean, obviously, like you said, like Anoncast has all of the casts and then you're able to curate. But is there something even like sort of higher level than that, which is maybe either the requirements to be able to cast from Anoncast could potentially be not only like they're at a certain threshold right now, right? Which is like, I don't know what it is, however many Anon. And then 5,000 and on. And then it started out as significantly greater, right? Wasn't it like 50,000 or
Yeah.
100,000 or
So
something?
yes, exactly. So like, yeah, the balance, the requirements is definitely the hardest part, and that's because like the price fluctuates. And so like,
Yeah,
yeah, originally it was 30,000 when like on was 10x cheaper, but then now it's just like if you leave it 30,000, it's just people are priced out, and you won't get like you won't get the quantity of content
right.
uh in order to curate. And so yeah, the requirements is just like something that probably const like over time will probably continue to change. Right now, I think we found a pretty good balance with the 5,000 to post and 2 million to promote slash curate. But like
Uh,
the biggest like criticism that still remains, that I think is totally valid, is that like only like basically like the whales get to decide what gets posted, and like that is just a single person deciding what gets posted. And so like the right model that we eventually want to move to whenever kind of like things are a little bit more stable is weighted voting. And so like people that hold the non can like or upvote posts on a noncast, and like once it reaches some threshold with some minimum number of people that have upvoted it, then it gets posted. And so that way it's not just one whale decides what goes. It's like if 10 people with like a fraction of the whales anon say this should get promoted, it'll get promoted.
right. And do you feel that at this point, it's interesting, I might have a I don't know if bias is the right word, but like biased view in that I follow a non-cast on Warpcast. I don't follow a non-bangers like I will. I didn't yet. And probably what I would prefer to be doing is following a non-bangers and not a non-cast. And that might sort of like solve my issues as like an observer. Because from my perspective, like I don't really care as much about the curation thing because I'm sort of seeing the raw data, and I guess I'm probably seeing the other stuff between Twitter and the non-bangers on Warpcast, even though I'm not following it. Probably seeing that stuff, but like I'm not really concerned with like, hey, like who's choosing these? Like, this isn't what I would choose. I'm more so like the bigger problem to me as of today. And granted, like I mean, this is all like insanely impressive, and like you said, you start working on it like literally what, like a week ago. Yeah, it's like crazy speed, and you obviously expect. I mean, these are the trade-offs of launching something super quick. It's you're going to have, things that you have to iron out right away if it blows up. And so this is not in any sort of like bad way, but I think the big standout thing to me is like, are there ways to improve the baseline requirements for casting? Because on the one hand, you have the threshold, which I understand why it's not higher, because as the price has gone up, like you don't want to have a ridiculous, threshold people have to pass in terms of like US dollars for how much anon they have to hold in order to be able to contribute, because they might be like quality casters who really could contribute well. They just don't have like the funds to, put in a huge stake or whatever. But I wonder if there's like other elements that you could tie into the casting prerequisites where it's, maybe it's not just how much anon you hold, maybe it's pulling in other data from, whether that be from, Farcaster, like your, FID or some, your follower ratio, or like, any sort of data point that you can basically pull in from on chain. Engagement with your casts on your personal account, engagement with your casts on your previous anon casts, Like anything like that, I wonder, have you considered other things that you could tie in or not so much yet?
Yeah, not so much yet, but like we definitely considered like what types of different parameters we can like potentially add in the future. I think like we're basically like the problem is like I don't think you actually want to make this too complex because then it's
Right.
like, oh, do I meet the requirements? Oh, what do I need? Like, where do I go to do this? And ultimately, do you do want to make at least the base layer as accessible as possible. Because like you're not gonna get the best content if there's only a certain set of requirements to be like to get posted. You want to make it as open as possible. Um, and then that is what leads to like there needs to be like a curation layer. Like I don't want to call it like a I don't want to call it like a protocol, but it's like kind of analogous to like a protocol for how a noncast works right now. It's like the like base account is basically like it's just fully permissionless. The only thing is you have to own 5,000 anon. And then like on top of it, anon bangers and the Twitter account is you can effectively call it like a client, which is only selecting a specific subset of posts to share. You can imagine that someone else could set up their own uh, anoncast, warpcast, or Twitter account and like have like some other type of filtering, or maybe it's only anoncast images. And then in the future, like the plan is like we may want to add like ZK badges. And so like if you have like 100,000 followers on Farcaster, you can like generate a proof of that badge and then attach it to your post. And then maybe someone can create a account that only shows an oncast from people with 100,000 follower badge, right? So like the initial goal at least is to just make like the base layer as like open and accessible as possible. And that's why we've kind of removed the censorship of it and then like reduce like the balance requirements like a lot lower.
Have you thought about I don't want to like overwhelm with all these things. Like I know you've got your hands like plenty full already, but have you thought about like the badges thing is a super cool idea. And before you mentioned, people attaching them to their cast, I was thinking like people actually just building up their own anon profiles with their own like ZK credentials basically. Has there been or have you thought about at all any like the possibility of a non-client where there's actual independent profiles rather than sort of the one funnel through which everything anon is coming through with potentially various like you're talking about as if like so there's like the raw anoncast feed and then there's anon bangers and there could potentially be another profile created for like anon um you know verified or whatever you want to call it, like people who have a certain credential and you could have any number of accounts with different sort of like credential requirements. But at a certain point, if you just sort of like keep going down that, like you could just have the individual profiles which are anonymous. Is that
Yeah,
something that you've thought about or not so much?
I've thought about it. The reason like I push back on that is like technically you can do that already. Like just go fund a wallet with ETH, go create a supercast, like an account on supercast, and nobody knows who created that account, right? Like that exists. You don't need the ZK stuff. Um, I think what makes Anoncast interesting is it's plugging into the same distribution. Basically, we're like Anoncast itself has what like 8,000 followers on Twitter and Farcaster now, and by posting into Anoncast, you're basically posting into that network. Versus like if you're starting a new account every time, like for like every user doesn't have their own network, and like that post ultimately for most people will just not go anywhere.
Yeah, I think what would be I get that and generally agree. I think the crucial thing that would need to be included in an on-client sort of thing would be porting over your following somehow. So it
Yeah,
might be like sort of a client where you sign in with your Farcaster And there's just like various things that come with the territory of signing up for this thing, which would be like, um, you're signing up for it. You're signing up with like, you're connecting your existing forecaster. Maybe you need a minimum number of anon to join the client, like to sign up for an account in the first place. And like by default, you are getting an account with like a question mark PFP, and it's like privacy preserving by default. But it plugs into like somehow, I don't know if this is even possible, but like it plugs in somehow into Farcaster so that you have the same number of whoever has joined this client who follows you on like Farcaster, or you can think of it as like Warpcast or whatever, like automatically follows you here. They just don't, no one
Yeah.
knows who each other is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that could be interesting for sure. Yeah, if you're porting over the existing graph in an anonymous way, that could be interesting.
Because
Yeah,
then
just
someone like, well, I'll just use myself as an example. Like I've got like 10,000, 12,000 followers, something like that on Warpcast. And if I go and sign up for this new thing, I'm not going to have like, well, I'm not sure how exactly it would work, but like in the worst case, if you can't have all of your followers, at the very least, you can have anyone else who has signed up for,
yeah,
let's just call it a non-client for now. So it might only be like 300 out of my 10,000, but like as the, if that client can gain traction, then ultimately it could be like sort of a non-parallel to Warpcast or something like that.
yeah. I think got to think about it, but yeah, I think there's definitely like something interesting there. Again, like the other value prop of like an oncast as it is that like we are not like people don't have to like go use another app. They
Yeah.
only have to use the app to post, and then they can consume it in the apps that they already consume, which is like I think a huge positive. But yeah, like totally. If there's an anon client, the harder part is actually just like getting people onboarded and using that app.
So the other big thing you guys have shipped, or you've shipped since the original Anoncast launched, is this ability to reveal. I've seen it, but I actually don't know exactly how it works. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So it reveals is basically like when you create an oncast, you can actually add a secret phrase so that later on you can enter that secret phrase and be able to prove that you were the one that created it. Um, yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting thing because like the model that the way that you should think about it is like you can just like post predictions or like raw thoughts on Oncast, and if the predictions come true, or if your raw thoughts are something a lot of people agree with, but maybe like you don't think people will agree with you, so you won't post it on main. You can retroactively basically claim credit for having posted that, and then bring kind of like that discussion back to maybe your main account, right? And especially like for both of those, ultimately, like it ends up being bragging rights, and
Right.
we think at least that there's probably a few interesting use cases for like basically collecting that clout of having posted something that goes viral anonymously. The other interesting thing that a few people have thought of and like could be interesting to build, and actually like the way that we designed it, I like is like people like Anoncast doesn't have to be the one to like add support for this and build this. Is that you can basically put bounties on anonymous posts, and so like you can say a post goes viral and like it's like a hot take, and someone just wants to put like 50K down on that person revealing their identity. There's probably some interesting incentive there that causes the person that posted that hot take to actually reveal their identity to claim that 50K. Um, it's yeah, like there's no like it overall like the feature is just to encourage more like gamification, more fun around anonymous posting.
Yeah, I think the example of like having like a really out of the money prediction that is for some reason, either offensive or honestly like just could make you look like very dumb or something, that you wouldn't want to post it on your main account, but then it turns out to be right. That's like a clear use case for it, I think. The bounty thing is kind of interesting. Like I try to discount skepticism in crypto because of all the things that I've been surprised that people want to do, that people nonetheless want to do. I'm trying to think of like why someone would care enough to put up a bounty to like for someone for an anon cast, the author behind it to like reveal their identity.
Yeah,
But
I,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
I also don't really see like I personally also don't really see like the immediate value, but I've like seen it now from multiple people that they think it would be cool, and I personally feel like I'm missing something there. There's actually an ongoing bounty right now. Like someone posted something and said if you can guess who I am, you'll get $25,000 or 25,000 on. Um, so I don't know. I think like yeah, the bounty thing is weird, but we'll see if I don't know. We'll see if something develops there.
Well, and it's coming from the same functionality, it sounds like, as the generic reveal function, which I do think is valuable. And
Yeah,
just like you said, it's just like more fun. So I don't think it hurts. Like it's another hypothetical use case which may or may not come to fruition, but I don't think enabling it, like, it's not like you added some like clunky feature to enable it that
yeah.
like
I
isn't
mean, the
useful for
bounties
anything
wasn't
else.
even like yeah, it was just like kind of a side effect. Is
Yeah.
like once we launch reveals, people are like, oh wait, we can use this to bounties on reveals. So
So is this
yeah,
something that has like obviously you wanted sort of like a break from this thing you've been grinding on for a while. This seemed like a fun thing. People wanted it. You built it. You launched it. It got great reception. I'm not sure if you sort of expected that or some fraction of that or whatever, but like it's got momentum. People are into it. Has it changed your view of like, going from, hey, this is like a, weekend project that I'll spend a day on and launch it and see what happens? Like, how has the response changed how you think about anoncast or anon more broadly and your involvement like building with it?
yeah, yeah. I will say like the biggest thing that's motivating is that Vitalik used it, and so like if I feel like if Vitalik is using your app and he's posting positively about it, there's probably something there that's worth continuing spending time on. Um, and also, yeah, obviously, like the reception is kind of crazy, and so yeah, right now I'm just all in on an oncast at least for the foreseeable future. Um, Crypto moves fucking super quick. It's only been a week. I posted yesterday. It's only been 2 weeks since Clanker launched, and Clanker's basically taken over. And so yeah, we'll see where we're at in another week or two.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy and it's definitely fast. Do you have thoughts on the broader, clanker phenomenon as it relates to like coincidentally it seems pump.fun. I haven't, I've been involved somewhat with some of this stuff, but I've generally stayed away from like meme coins for the most part. And then only within like the last few weeks, I was like, you know what? It's actually like a really stupid story. I was at a bachelor party and this is like probably something I should be like casting from anon rather than saying, but here we go. It's not that bad, but I was like playing blackjack and just getting like fleeced. And I was like, man, like this is what it feels like to play a game where the house, has the advantage. And I was like, when I do like the stupid stuff with the meme coins, like it doesn't at all feel like this. It feels like I have a bit of edge. And so I was like, you know what? Like, even though it's like, it doesn't really match my personality or my preferences from everything from like, I just don't really want to trade like the different types of dogs that much. And also like, I don't want to do things that incentivize my being like glued to my phone all day if possible. And like being super like price sensitive on short-term swings and all of this thing. Like, it's really just like not a good match for me. But I was like, I feel like I actually might have an edge here, and maybe I don't, but so I started to experiment like a little more within the past few weeks, and it's just coincidentally timed with like, Clanker coming out, which is nice because I spend more time like sort of in the base ecosystem than over on Solana. But it seems like, Solana with Pump.Fun, like they had the live stream, and again, like I sort of haven't followed this super closely, but the live streams seem to have taken like an extremely dark turn, which I guess they've disabled, and like seems like the first kind of big stain. I feel like
Yeah,
they'll probably pull through, barring anything like regulatory, but like they sort of took a bit of a punch, which I feel like they've sort of been riding for the most part unscathed for months. And at the same time, in parallel, Clanker launches the most sort of popularly received meme coin launcher on base. And so the timing has been kind of interesting, but I can't help but feel that the base, like the people in the base ecosystem, are somewhat different from the people in Solana. And I feel like there's this idea that, like, yeah, we're just going to do the same thing that's happening on Solana with a small difference that, like, you tag the Clanker bot and the Clanker bot has a personality and whatever. But I feel like the difference in ecosystems might be more than that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on, like, this,
Yeah.
somewhat delayed rise of meme coins on base. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I will say is like I also have not traded that many meme coins. Hence why I was so like I bought it on like 5 days after everyone else. Um I I also have never used Solana. I will say that.
Oh,
Literally never used Solana. Um
is that mostly just because you're, like, sort of comfortable in Solidity and don't want to start from scratch somewhere, or is there, like, a
I mean I
something
think
that you
myself
have an issue with?
I don't really care. I think of myself as an app dev and I'll just use like whatever. Ultimately, like all the on-chain stuff is just the means to an end for building products. Doesn't actually matter which chain it is. And anyone that tells you that is just like trying to push their own narrative. um,
Well, hold on for one sec. So you don't think, like, you think you I take I've heard the view, and I you know generally accept the view that, like, the chain isn't, like, the end all be all, but, like, if you go and launch something tomorrow on, like, Tezos, like,
yeah,
you don't think that's a disadvantage versus doing it on Base or Solana?
yeah. I mean, the disadvantage there is not the actual chain. It's that's the
Distribution.
the user acquisition.
Sure.
So like
Okay.
you're just so like the chain itself doesn't matter. It's the fact that there's users on Solana and Base is what
Got it.
matters.
Got it.
And so like for me, it does. Yeah, like I will use Solana if I want to target those users, but like up until now, I've only really built products to target people on Farcaster or people on in the Ethereum ecosystem.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I'm really trading meme coins until like a few weeks ago. I was actually kind of like thinking it was a bit silly, but now I'm like, I feel like I finally get it after like building it. It's like, it's ultimately for me, it's just like all fun. Like, it's just fun to trade with your friends and trade random tokens. And it's basically just a form of entertainment. And I do not get upset if I like lose money on some. It's just like kind of like the same as like going to a casino, right? Like you're going in with like a some amount of money that you're willing to lose for that entertainment value.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, I don't know. I've came around to it. I think it's interesting. I think base is definitely gonna pick up more. But I think like we're probably, and this is like fully like just random prediction is it feels like things are a bit too hot right now and probably might be close to like at least
Local
a
people.
top, local peak maybe. But also, I don't know because like things just fucking go crazy in crypto. And no one like I feel like I can't really predict anything in this
Yeah.
space.
No, I'm of the same exact view. I feel like it's feels like that. But I think that's also how people, mess up, like, on it from a financial perspective. Like, the best trades, you feel like, oh man, this thing's gone up 20x in 7 days. Like, it's got to be, it's got to do a correction, and then, long term, I still believe in it. And then so you sell in it thinking that you sell it thinking that you'll get back in, and then it did 20x in 7 days, and then it does another 20x in the next 4 days, and you're left in the dust. So
Yeah,
it's definitely hard to predict, and I generally just like try. That's why I had the initial aversion to meme coins in the first place. Is that it seems very short term oriented, based on these swings. In most cases, not in all cases. I mean, you could argue to some extent Bitcoin is a meme coin, and that's certainly been a long term game, um, but with some of these other things, like, I don't consider myself someone who has any, like, ability to predict, these, like, short-term swings and things. So it just doesn't feel like the right game to me. But it's to your point, it's just been kind of like fun, to play around with small amounts of money. I don't understand how some people with these massive bags. I put out this survey on Farcaster actually that was like, what percent of your crypto is in Bitcoin plus Ethereum? And the options were like, less than 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or 75 to 100. And it was sort of like a barbell, like, 40% of people above 75, 40% of people below 25, and few in the middle. And that it's that lower segment that I just have a hard time understanding. I'm like, if you believe in crypto, I mean, you could add Solana to that or whatever you want, but like, if you believe in crypto long term, I don't understand how you're holding a lot of like meme coins, but not holding like Ethereum or Bitcoin or even Solana. It's just like it's a super risky. Like, I don't know. I still view crypto as generally highly risky. I believe in it strongly, and like my overall money and the percentage of it that's in crypto says that loud and clear. However, I acknowledge that it feels like still a very risky, asset class, and so within it, I would like to be relatively low risk as much as I can, and then just kind of have fun, like you said, like how much you're willing to lose the casino amount of money with the meme coins and stuff. But who knows? Maybe the meme coin whales will be laughing all the way to the bank. Hard to say.
Yeah.
So anyway, what else outside of Anoncast? Anything else on your mind these days, or any of the projects that you've been working on that you want to talk about? I think I know about a couple of them, but I don't need to like sort of bring them up if they're not things that you want to talk about right now.
Yeah, I don't think they're really worth talking about. And also, like what I was working on before Anoncast, I will see if uh, I'm gonna continue working on it, and if so, I probably don't want to share it yet. So
Yeah, makes sense. Um, cool. Well, I know we're coming up on time. I forget actually if I scheduled this for half hour. If it was a half hour, I'm sorry for going way
all
over.
good.
But for an hour, we're coming up on. So I'll let you go. But appreciate all the time. It's been awesome having a conversation with you, and now I can see everything you're shipping in the feed with a lot more context, and we'll be rooting for a noncast and everything else that you're working on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.